Hello everyone, it's Ange de Lumière, your host here on I Can Help You Thrive, and we're recording today the second episode of my podcast called From Logic to Magic, and today we're going to talk about signs. So if you come on here live, I would love to answer your questions about signs from the universe or from even departed loved ones, whatever it is. This is a subject that I'm really excited about. I suppose it started with me quite a few years ago when I was still working in the corporate world as an international business lawyer, and I had taken a sabbatical for 3 months because I had been with my company for over 10 years, so that was one of the bonuses that they gave us, that we could take a sabbatical. And whilst on sabbatical, I trained on my Reiki 1 level. And I'm not going to go too much into Reiki because this is not the topic of today's episode. But let's say it was a completely different experience from being a corporate lawyer, obviously. I will say that when I met the Reiki master that trained me to level 3, the moment I walked through the door, she said I was a natural healer, and it wasn't such a surprise because someone else had told me before. But that was definitely a sign to confirm that I was doing the right thing. Even though for me at the time it was quite a leap of faith and quite almost scary to do these things, because even in organized religion like Christianity, sometimes Reiki, they don't necessarily know about Reiki, but I had a conversation with a vicar once who told me that that I was a very nice person, but he had been told that actually it was wrong to do Reiki, and so there's a lot of judgment around that. But so anyway, I had just trained on my Reiki 1 level, and I was back to work. It was the first day back to work after 3 months. It felt really weird, and over my lunchtime, I went for a walk after I had my sandwich, and I sort of asked the universe, what now? What am I supposed to do? I'm a corporate lawyer. I've trained in Reiki. How does this fit? And probably 5 minutes after I asked this question, I was walking down the street. The sky was a pure blue. There's not a cloud in sight, okay? And I looked up and I saw this big white feather that literally flew from nowhere. There was no bird flying above me, nothing. Flew out, pulled out from the sky, and literally landed in the palm of my hand. Now that's probably quite a spectacular sign. So this is how I wanted to start this episode, to explain to you that signs come in many different forms and in surprising ways. But the very first thing that you need to do if you want to be open to receiving signs from the universe is, I guess we need to have this conversation about coincidences and synchronicity. I come from a background where people believed in coincidences. They didn't believe in synchronicity. So if a feather had fallen from the sky, they would have said, oh, it's a bird feather, and not thought any more of it. And that's okay. But I suppose if you want to receive signs from the universe, from your guides, angels, departed loved one, whatever it is, perhaps that you're on the right track. Suppose you're making a really important decision in your business, and although you have a gut feeling, you're not confident enough about your intuition to know if it's the right decision, and you ask for a sign. The biggest mistake people make is that they immediately discard it. When it happens, they forgot that they asked for a sign, and then they discard it as a coincidence. And it's a bit like if you asked your best friend for advice, and they gave you advice, and then you just completely ignore it. So if you do that, for sure you probably won't see signs anymore, or things will just slot in the background again, because it's quite easy to stop to miss a sign. And the reason is we live in a distraction society, so we are always busy in our heads. We're busy going from one place to another. We rarely have time to notice things. And you know, I hold my hand up. I do that a lot as well. If I'm preoccupied, I'm completely in my own world, I could miss something completely obvious. It's happened to me actually. I realized recently I was walking through a familiar street and I noticed something for the first time, and I had been walking down that street thousands of times. I've lived where I've lived for 15 years. So when I noticed this new thing, I thought, I knew it had been there all along. It didn't look like it was something new. I thought, this is incredible how you can miss something so obvious for so long. And that's because we are preoccupied and we often, we're not in the now. So I would suggest first, if you want to make sure you don't miss your signs, once you ask any question, you stay in the now and observe, trying to slow down the pace in your life. And generally I would say meditation is good for that, even if it's just 5 minutes a day, to just quiet your mind so that you're more observant of what happens. So the second thing I wanted to talk about is that, what are your expectations? Do you expect to receive a sign or not? Our beliefs come into the experience as well. So if you think that you never receive signs, everybody else does, but you don't, then this is what's going to happen, because the universe likes to confirm your beliefs. The universe likes to really meet you where you are, and it's not that it doesn't want to, it's that it's this law of attraction thing there, where you have to be a match. So if you absolutely don't believe in sign, or you think you never get signs and your best friend always does, and you feel horrible about it and poor me and all that sort of thing, then it's very likely you won't get a sign. So perhaps you could work on that. You know, I remember myself, it wasn't about signs, but you know, these competitions where you can win something, and I'm not talking about the ones where it's really an excuse to get your email from a company, but I knew a Facebook friend. When I say Facebook friend, it's a bit loosely, but you know what I mean. And this girl, who I like very much, she organized the competition to get a name for her online course. She couldn't find the name for this course, and she thought it'd be a nice way to engage people. And I just put a name that immediately came to my mind on the comments under her post, and I happened to win the prize. And it's surprising because at that time I was convinced I never won anything. But I guess I had opened the door in my mind by entering this competition that perhaps this could be possible. Actually, I remember when I wrote the comment, I thought to myself, I didn't want the prize. I just did that to help her. But I think the universe had other ideas for me. So, but from then on, it kind of opened the door a little bit to the fact that, yes, I can win things. Yes, I can receive from the universe free gifts. And it's happened a lot since. So expectations are really important. And I want you to keep an open mind. This is all that's asked of you at this point. It's just to keep an open mind and play. Just have a play. Now, the third point I wanted to mention is that when you ask for a sign, be careful not to be too prescriptive. Because if you are, and I remember my sister when she first did that, and I didn't know much about anything at the time, so I thought, wow, this is great what she's doing. And I'm not saying it's not great, but I'm saying it's not necessarily what you want to do. She said, well, if I'm going to take this course, I'm just giving an example from the top of my mind, then it will be a yes if I see someone walk in front of me with a red scarf. And someone did that. She saw someone, hello Stephanie, she saw someone walk on the pavement with a red scarf. So she said, okay, well, I'm going to take this course. Now, this is all very well, but it actually didn't take into account the power, our co-creating power, which means that if you have a very clear sign that you ask the universe to send you, then there is a possibility that you are going to create this sign. And I want to talk about the book that Pam Grant wrote, which I really love, called E Square. You might have read it or not, but in this book she shows how when you put your attention to a certain item or idea, then it pops into your world on a regular basis. So one of the exercises, I think she asks if you can focus your attention on finding cars of a certain color and a certain make. And I remember doing that one summer when we were driving from where I live to Cornwall, and I set myself to find purple cars, which are quite unusual. And I managed to see, I think, up to 100 on the way in 4 hours that we drove. And I had never seen a purple car before, or never noticed a purple car before. So when you ask for signs, be careful that it's quite different from manifesting things. You want to keep an open mind. And of course, if you don't get the sign that you've asked for within 48 hours of you asking, then ask again. Now, I'm going to give you some examples of the kind of signs that you can get, but I will say the sky's the limit. You can get just as many signs. The variety is incredible, and it's because your world is rich in symbols. And that's something that I love. I also love looking into symbols, their significance and everything else. But most probably the universe, or if you're open to the idea that there's angels and guides, will use something that's meaningful to you. So it might mean nothing to someone else, but it will mean something to you. So I'm going to give you, there's about 6 main ways that the universe can give you signs. It can be feathers. It can be numbers, repeated numbers. It can be car plates. It can be names, songs, or conversation. So I'm going to start with, I've already given you the example of feathers and how when I was in the corporate world and I just trained on my Reiki 1, I was given this incredible sign of receiving a feather from nowhere. I didn't quite know what it meant, but since then I've recognized that when you get those feathers, and for me I call them angel feathers if they're white, regardless, but some people like all feathers are signs. And for me, they're usually an encouragement from the universe to keep going and that I'm on the right track. And actually, I remember attending, that was a couple of years further down the line, I made friends with my neighbor when I was training in spiritual healing. Actually, that was probably just before I was training in Reiki 1. And we went to a Diana Cooper workshop. Now, for those who don't know who Diana Cooper is, she's a lovely angel lady in the UK who does lots of meditation, guided meditations. She wrote books that I really love about, it's called usually A Little Light on Angels or A Little Light on Spiritual Laws, that sort of thing. And on the way, this is how I learned about angel feathers. On the way, we were walking and there was like a grass area next to the pavement. And as we walked through that grass, there was like dozens of these little white feathers. And my friend, neighbor, said to me, these are angel feathers. It's a sign that this is a good thing for us to go there. And I'm reminded of a lawyer that I know, because I still know lawyers, who once said, I think she posted on Facebook, how do you know, she was holding, actually she posted a picture of herself holding feathers, and she said, how do you know it's not like just a bird that's been eaten by a cat and then you have all the feathers scattered on the ground, or that they're angel feathers? And in answer to her question, I would say it's very obvious when it's a bird that's been eaten, because you have more than just the feathers, and they're all scattered in one particular way, where the poor animal, the poor bird was eaten. So it's very obvious the difference. Whereas angel feathers are little fluffy white feathers that sometimes are on their own, so there's just the one, or they could be a group, but it really doesn't look like there's been an incident that happened. So I hope that answers some of your question. I'm very happy to take any of your questions about signs, since this is a live, so feel free to pop a comment on the chat box. The other thing is numbers. So I know my father had a favorite number, which was number 3, which I didn't know about. And if I see 333, very often I know that it's linked to my dad, who's now in heaven. So he sometimes speaks to me through numbers. And this is bringing me to a sign that he gave my sister when the day he died, which was incredibly powerful. My dad died about 4 years ago of a brain tumor. And my sister was staying with my mum in Paris when he died, to support her through the last days of what was happening. And so she picked up the phone when she received the call from the hospital to say that he had crossed over. And when she called me half an hour later, she said that at the very time where she picked up the phone, she saw 3 planes in the sky. And she explained to me that that's like magic number was number 3, that he always bought things in 3. So if you bought a shirt and he liked it, he would buy 3 of them and all that sort of thing, which I had no clue. My sister knows so much about our family, so much more than I do. And so it was an incredible sign from my dad to her and everybody else, because she shared with me that he had arrived safely, because when you take a plane and you see the plane flying in the sky, it's definitely a sign that you've arrived and you're safe, and you want to say to your loved ones that you're okay. And it was very, very comforting, for at least for my sister and I. My mum is too much of a skeptic. She doesn't believe in anything. Now, I want to share what happened this week, because this plane thing came about again, but I nearly missed the sign. And this is where I'm saying we have to be in the moment. We have to pay attention to what's happening around us, and to be open to synchronicity and not discard everything as a coincidence. So this week I drove my son to university and settled him down there, about 2 hours away from where we are, and it was a very emotional moment for me. And at one point I went for a walk with my other son, who decided to come with us. So it would be like a little nucleus of a family to take him down. We went on a walk next to the beach, and we walked past an incredible sculpture that had 3 planes flying into the sky. Sorry, I need to clear my throat. And although I looked at the sculpture and I found it absolutely gorgeous, it didn't click then. But the next day I went for a walk on my own, and suddenly I remembered how my dad had sent 3 planes when he died to my sister, so that he would comfort us about the fact he arrived safe in heaven. And I just broke down in tears, because this was such a clear sign that my dad was with me, supporting me. I know he absolutely adored his grandchildren. He spent a lot of time with them, at least my elder 2, before he passed. So, and also the reason why it made a lot of sense as well is because my son is about to start to study architecture, and it was my dad's biggest dream to study architecture, and he didn't, because it wasn't something that was considered acceptable. It was far too arty for his family, where everybody was either an engineer or a doctor. So he had 2 choices. At the time, it was a lot more difficult to oppose to your parents' expectations of you. So he wanted to be an architect. He was an incredible artist, just like my second son is. And he ended up being a doctor. So I think it made a lot of sense for him to pop up at that moment when I was settling my son at university last week, because on the one hand, he loved him to bits. He wanted to comfort me to the fact that he was around to guide him and be with him whilst I was going to leave him behind. I mean my son, obviously, not my dad, because he can be everywhere. And hi Michelle, I'm nearly finished with this episode. We're talking about signs, and it made sense as well because my dad would have a very an interest in, first of course, his grandson, even from heaven, and also because he wanted to study architecture. So of course he's going to hang around my son whilst he studies and watch his every steps, because that's something that he would have loved to do. That brings me to a little digression I want to make actually about departed loved ones, because many people believe that once people die, you just need to let them rest in peace, that they've had a very tiring life and they want to be left alone. And there's nothing like that. This is completely false. And it's not that I want to point the finger at my mother again, but she basically said, because she knows that I'm a medium and that my sister is a medium too, she said very, very clearly when my dad died, I do not want to hear from your dad. I want to move on. This is not my scene. I'm not interested. And she also said that it was wrong. When my grandmother died, I went to a medium who actually gave me signs and messages from my grandmother. And I never asked for them. My grandmother literally popped into the reading and started taking over the whole reading for me, where she was saying how proud she was of what I'd done and this and that and the other. And when I reported this conversation to my mother, she said it was absolutely wrong and that I was talking to the wrong people and that I shouldn't be going and basically disrupt my grandmother from her peace. But it's not like that at all. And Abraham Hicks speaks about this a lot. If you haven't heard about Abraham Hicks, I encourage you to watch some videos on YouTube. And they say that the consciousness, people in the spirit world, whether they've walked this earth or not, are incredibly interested in what's happening on earth. And if there was an interest that they had during their lives, so I'm just talking right now about my father and architecture, they will be hovering around people who are doing the same thing that they know, because it's something that still interests them from the other side. So this is a last aspect I wanted to talk about, signs. So we've talked about expectations, we've talked about what signs can look like. I've talked about numbers, feathers, car plates, names, songs, conversations. I'd like to say about the conversation, for example, you could ask a question. You want to know what is the next logical step in my business, as an example. If you hear a conversation in public transport or somewhere where you go, or suddenly a friend talks to you about something that answers your question and that you haven't prompted the conversation, it's not like, oh, what do you think I should do? And then your friend says, oh, I think you should. Or they would probably just spontaneously have researched something and they're very excited to share something with you, and it happens to be the exact answer to the question that you've asked. Then this is your sign, okay? If you're in doubt and you want to have more confirmation because you're at a stage where you're still uncertain about all this business of asking for signs, then feel free to ask for another sign, and even 3 signs if you want to be extra sure. The universe, guides, angels will never get annoyed that you ask for more than 1 sign, because they understand that first, signs can be confusing and you want to make sure that you've interpreted things right. And also they know that we are skeptics, for the most part anyway. And for me, I need to say, it took me a long time to come to the place of seeing signs and understanding signs, and it's a practice, okay? At the first, for me, it was so alien. It was like, okay, but I had an open mind, so I thought to myself, I'm going to try this, see if it works. And at the time, it wasn't sign I was asking for, it was parking spaces, because I'd read in a book that you could ask for parking spaces from the angels. And I thought, what a ludicrous idea. Asking for parking space from angels? Angels are not about parking spaces. They're like about, fluffy things and faith and this and that. But I thought, this is an interesting concept. I'm going to give it a try. And so, because I was extremely stressed about finding parking spaces back then, and it probably is because I come from Paris, where finding a parking space can be a bit of a headache, I decided to try it out, and lo and behold, I got my first parking space easy, and I thought, oh my god, this is incredible, I'm going to try again. And so I want you to have this sort of experimental attitude towards getting signs from the universe. You know, I want you to be playful, I want you to have positive expectations, but at the same time, if you don't receive the sign right away, I want you to try again and try again and try again. This is an experiment. You want to see if you can play with the universe. This is like a game, you know. It's not like hide and seek, but it's like, oh, okay, well, I'd love to have a sign. And then you can like hear a song that would have in the lyrics the exact answer that you're looking for. So this is a little bit, I mean, I know sometimes, and this is a tiny bit too off the subject in the sense that I'm talking to you, like, I don't expect you to be New Age if you're watching this or listening to this show, but I do, because it's called From Logic to Magic, so you're more on the logical side, but hopefully you have an open mind. So it could be names, for example. You might want to know how to name your baby, and you ask the universe, what name should I name my baby? If you see or hear the same name 3 times in the span of 24, 30, 48 hours, then that's a sign. Obviously, you still always have to check whether it feels right to you, your own intuition, but that can be incredible. And on the subject of names, it's actually the way that all of my children gave me their names. I have 4 kids, and I've chosen none of their names. I had some really set ideas, especially with my first 2, of what I was going to call them. And then near the time of the birth, the name completely changed, because I saw, actually for my first one, I saw his name in a novel that I was reading, and I just knew when I saw the name that that was the name that he wanted to be called. And at that time, I wasn't even into any of this stuff or intuition or anything. I was really at the beginning of my career as a lawyer, but I just knew. And the same thing happened with my second child. Literally, it was actually the name of a file, of a legal file that I was working on. And when I saw that name, I just knew it was the perfect name for my child. So these signs can come, you know, they can come from really mundane things, like the name of a file you're working on, or a name that you see in a book that you're reading in a novel, and it might feel completely disconnected or maybe too mundane for it to be a real sign. But it's true, because what happens is, especially at the beginning, you're not going to get like an apparition unless you've been meditating for years and you're already super clairvoyant or whatever it is. I still don't get apparitions. So if you ask for a sign, you're not going to have Archangel Michael or Gabriel literally popping up in front of you, talking to you and showing you all these things. This is not how it happens for most of us mortals. It's much more likely to be a friend who's going to tell you something randomly, or you're going to read something in a book and you're going to have that sense that this is the message that you're supposed to get. Okay, so this is my little chat about signs. I hope you found it interesting. If you want to ask me any questions, you can in the comments, or if you're watching the replay or listening to this recording on my podcast, feel free to reach out on my Facebook page called I Can Help You Thrive to ask me some questions about signs. And for those who've come live to this recording, thank you very much for coming. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Have a great week. Bye.